I didn't get an invitation to my own daughter's wedding, the same wedding I paid for. And now that her marriage has crumbled, guess who she's reaching out to? Me. Honestly, I never thought I'd be in this position, but here I am. My daughter Tessa, she's 25 now, chose not to invite me to her wedding. Let that sink in. The man footing the bill wasn't welcome at the event. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the whole thing. Writing this out might help me process it, or at least let me vent for a minute. First off, I need to be upfront. Tessa's always been a tough one. Even when we were both younger, back when she was just a kid and I was still learning how to be a dad, things were rocky. But then again, what family doesn't have its share of ups and downs, right? Still, I never imagined things would go this far. Sure, we've butted heads over the years, but nothing in our past prepared me for this level of distance. Anyway, I'll do my best to lay it out plainly. Tessa had been dating a guy named Damon for several years. They didn't have much money between them, and when they started making wedding plans, I offered to take care of the expenses. I thought it was a generous gesture, something that might help them start married life on solid ground. Weddings cost a fortune, and since they were strapped financially, I figured it was the least I could do. It felt good to support her like that, and I really thought she'd appreciate it. I mean, come on, your daughter's wedding? That's supposed to be a huge milestone. I wasn't expecting a red carpet or anything, but a little gratitude would have been nice. Instead, everything started to slowly unravel. I remember one conversation with her in particular. I was trying to be helpful, just tossing out a simple idea. Hey Tessa, I said, have you sorted the seating? Should I look into renting some extra chairs? She barely glanced up from her phone, distracted and dismissive. I think it's fine, Dad. We've got it under control, she mumbled. I lifted an eyebrow. You sure? I'm happy to pitch in for a few extra things if you need them. I said we've got it, okay? She snapped, looking up at me for the first time in what felt like forever. The sudden edge in her voice caught me off guard. I'm only trying to make sure you've got everything you need. It's really no big deal, I told her, trying to stay calm. She let out a sigh and rolled her eyes. We don't need you micromanaging everything, okay? We're good. It was little things like that, small moments where my help was brushed off like a nuisance, that started piling up. I wasn't trying to control anything. I was just trying to lend a hand. I couldn't figure out why she was being so cold when all I was doing was offering support. Time went on, and from the outside, it looked like the wedding plans were coming along just fine. Tessa seemed to have everything handled. I decided to stay out of the details. I didn't want to overstep. I trusted her judgment. But one day, I thought it might be nice to include my brother Marcus on the guest list. He and Tessa had always shared a good relationship, so I figured it wouldn't be an issue. One more guest, right? No big deal. I called the wedding coordinator to check if we could squeeze him in, and that's when things got weird. When I asked about adding Marcus, the planner hesitated. They sounded uncomfortable. Then they told me the guest list was full. Full? It's a wedding, not a concert with limited seats. You can always add one more. I pressed a bit, thinking maybe I'd misunderstood. Eventually, after some back and forth, the coordinator sent me the official guest list. And I swear, the second I opened it, my heart dropped. My name wasn't on it. Neither was Marissa's, my wife. I was stunned. I thought maybe it was an honest mistake, a clerical error or oversight. How could my own daughter not invite me to her wedding, especially considering I was the one footing the entire bill? It made no sense. I called the planner back, trying to keep my composure even though my head was spinning. I asked point-blank why we weren't on the list. The hesitation on the other end of the line told me everything before the words even came out. Then the planner hit me with the truth. Tessa had specifically asked them not to invite me or Marissa. And just to twist the knife, she even arranged for added security just in case we tried to show up anyway. I stood there, dumbfounded. My own daughter had planned her wedding in secret, behind my back, and made sure there'd be people at the door ready to keep me out. What in the world? I asked the planner for confirmation, still thinking maybe this was all some bizarre mix-up. But they forwarded me the emails. Everything was there, clear as day. Tessa had been planning this exclusion for weeks. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. She had made it crystal clear that we weren't welcome. I had no idea what to even say. I felt gutted. I thought I was doing something good, helping her have the wedding she dreamed of. And here she was, actively making sure I couldn't be a part of it. The betrayal hit me hard. But what crushed me even more wasn't just the absence of an invitation, it was the realization that this had been her plan from the start. It wasn't some slip-up. She went out of her way to ensure I stayed far away. Why? Because we'd had a few disagreements over the years? I didn't always see eye to eye with her choices, sure. But that's what being a parent is. You guide. You speak up. You try to be there even when your kid doesn't want to hear it. I kept replaying all the times I stood by her when school was rough, when she fell in with a bad crowd, when life got messy. I'd always shown up. I did my best to be someone she could count on. And now she decided I didn't belong at one of the most meaningful days of her life. And the worst part? I don't even know why. I'm not trying to play the victim here, but it felt deliberate, like a cold, calculated slap in the face. Sure, Tessa's had her moments. She's gotten upset with me before, but she usually cooled off and came around. This time? This felt different. This felt final. After I hung up, I just sat there staring at the email. I must have read it 100 times, hoping something in it would give me clarity. But it never came. The more I sat with it, the angrier I got. But buried under the anger was something deeper. A sadness I can't quite describe. There's a kind of grief that creeps in when you realize your own child doesn't want you in their life. I kept wondering, what did I do to deserve this? What pushed her this far? Yeah, we've argued. What family doesn't? But this was something else entirely. She didn't just leave me off the list, she made it impossible for me to even try to attend. Like I was being punished. But punished for what? I wish I could say this part of the story ends with some sort of healing moment, but it doesn't. I was left standing in the wreckage, confused, angry, and crushed. One thing was clear though. At some point, it stopped being just about the wedding. It had turned into something much deeper, something broken that I didn't know how to fix. When I got my hands on that guest list and saw my name wasn't on it, I was livid. I couldn't just sit there pretending everything was fine while knowing full well my daughter had made a conscious decision to keep me away from one of the biggest days of her life. I needed answers. I had to talk to Tessa. I couldn't just let it go. So I picked up the phone and called her. No answer. Tried again, straight to voicemail. And that's pretty much how it went all day. I told myself she was probably busy, caught up in the final stretch of wedding chaos. Still, I was desperate for some kind of explanation. I couldn't tell if I was more hurt or angry, but I knew I had to hear it from her mouth. I left her a voicemail asking no, begging her to call me back. But the silence kept dragging on. And that silence? It was driving me out of my mind. After 4 days of nothing, I'd had enough. If she wasn't going to come to me, then I'd go to her. She lived just a short drive away, and I figured maybe, just maybe, we could talk face to face and work through whatever this was. I didn't have a speech planned or anything. Truth is, I barely knew what I was going to say. I just knew I had to try. Maybe she'd explain everything. Maybe there was a chance to sort it out. Or maybe I was just fooling myself into thinking this was salvageable. By the time I pulled up to her place, my heart was pounding. I had so many thoughts swirling around in my head, and yet none of them felt like the right thing to say. I knocked on the door, unsure of what would happen next. And then Tessa opened it. She looked me dead in the eyes, like she'd been expecting this confrontation. No shock, no hesitation. Just cold acceptance. That alone made my blood boil. But I kept my cool. At least, I tried to. There was no need to come in guns blazing. We stood there for a second before she finally said, in the most detached voice, "What do you want, Dad?" Like I was some random neighbor showing up uninvited. I didn't waste any time. I want to know why I'm not on the guest list. Why did you shut me out of your wedding? She gave me a lazy sigh, rolled her eyes, and muttered, "I figured you'd find out eventually." That response? That hit a nerve. I could feel my voice starting to tremble, but I pressed on. Why, Tessa? What did I do that was so bad you felt the need to erase me from your wedding? She shrugged, completely unbothered, and said, "I was saving you the hassle of having to show up." Like it was nothing. Like she'd just done me a favor by cutting me out of her life. Then she added, as if it were an afterthought, "I'll send you the photos if I have time." That's when I lost it. What the hell is wrong with you? I snapped. I was shaking not just with anger, but with heartbreak. After everything I'd done for her, this was how she repaid me? I couldn't understand it. How could a daughter ban her own father from her wedding and treat it like it was no big deal? But she wasn't finished. Not even close. She started laying into me, listing off all the reasons she thought I deserved to be excluded. Said I never had her back. Claimed I always took someone else's side. Accused me of shoving Marissa, her stepmom, into her face like she was supposed to be grateful. She dragged up stuff from years ago, things I thought we'd moved past. Times she felt I should have defended her, like when she got into it with her cousin or when school got tough and I didn't step in. Look, I'll be honest. There were moments I didn't defend her. And I stand by those choices. She wasn't always in the right, and I wasn't about to encourage her when she was clearly wrong. I tried to explain that to her. Tried to help her see my side. But it didn't matter. In her mind, I'd failed her. Over and over. She told me the wedding was her way of finally taking control, of punishing me for all the times she believed I let her down. She even brought up the incident with the pills when she was younger. Yeah, that was a hard chapter. But I didn't walk away from her. I stuck it out. I got her help. I did everything I could to get her back on track. But none of that seemed to count anymore. In her version of things, I'd let her down in every way that mattered. And hearing it all pour out of her, this decade's worth of anger, was crushing. It wasn't just the wedding. That was just the tip of a much deeper iceberg I didn't even know existed. And the way she hurled all that bitterness at me like I was the root of everything wrong in her life? It was too much. I broke down. Tears came without warning. I didn't plan to cry, it just happened. I looked her in the eye and asked, "What did I do that was so unforgivable, Tessa? Why are you doing this to me?" I hoped, maybe foolishly, that she'd show some kind of remorse. That something in her would soften. But she stayed cold as stone. "You were never on my side," she said flatly. "You cared more about your life with Marissa. You never cared about me." Those words? They felt like a punch to the gut. I tried to tell her she was wrong. That I'd always loved her. That she mattered more than anything to me. But her mind was made up. She was convinced I'd traded her for a new life, and she wasn't interested in hearing otherwise. I stood there, feeling completely out of place, like I didn't belong. And maybe I didn't. She didn't want me at her wedding. And from the way she was talking, she didn't want me in her life at all. No matter what I said, she had another grievance waiting. It was like she'd been keeping score all these years, and now she was reading off the list. Then she said the one thing that sealed it all, that I was just a source of negativity in her life. And with that, she told me to go. Not just out of her apartment, but out of her wedding. Out of her world. If I couldn't accept that, well, that was my problem. So I left. I walked out of there feeling like I'd just been hollowed out. I had no idea what to do next. My daughter didn't want me at her wedding, and clearly didn't want me at all. No matter how many times I replayed the conversation in my head, it all came back to the same thing. She had built up this wall of resentment for years. And I never saw it coming. After I left Tessa's place, I was a mess. I felt broken, completely unmoored. That whole conversation kept looping in my mind, over and over. I tried to stay strong, but the weight of her anger just crushed me. We were never the picture of closeness, sure, but to find out she saw me as some kind of enemy? That cut deep. And even days later, the silence continued. I hadn't heard a word from her. I tried giving her space, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she'd cool off enough to have a real conversation. But deep down, I think I already knew it wasn't going to happen. The wedding day was creeping closer, and I was stuck wondering whether I should just sit quietly and pretend none of this had happened. But I couldn't. I just couldn't fake it. One night, I sat down with Marissa, my wife, and laid it all out for her, everything that had gone down. Now, Marissa's always been more patient with Tessa than I ever managed to be. She's tried harder, put up with more. But even she had reached her limit. She looked at me and said flatly, "It's time to stop letting Tessa steamroll you." And you know what? She was right. I'd spent years walking on eggshells, doing whatever I could to keep the peace with my daughter. Trying to win her over. Trying to keep things from falling apart. But no matter what I did, it never felt like it was enough. That was the moment I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to keep paying for a wedding I wasn't even allowed to attend. I mean, really think about that. I was the one paying for the venue, the food, the whole production, and yet I wasn't even welcome there. The more I thought about it, the more absurd it seemed. And what stung the most? Tessa didn't seem to care. She didn't care about how I felt, didn't care how much I'd spent, didn't care that she'd left me out in the cold. She was focused on herself, on her version of the perfect day, and if that meant shutting me out, so be it. So I picked up the phone and called the venue directly. I told them to cancel everything. Pull the plug. I knew going in that I'd lose the deposits. At that point, I couldn't care less. It wasn't about the money anymore. I just couldn't stomach the idea of my daughter walking down the aisle at an event I had funded, while treating me like I didn't even exist. I had to draw a line in the sand, no matter how painful it was. The guy on the other end of the phone was clearly stunned. I don't think he'd ever had someone call up and cancel a wedding so close to the date. But I didn't flinch. I told him to let the caterers, the decorators, the whole crew know. Shut it all down. Tessa had paid the wedding planner, but I was the one footing the rest. And I was done. I know there are people out there who'll say I was being petty, that I should have just let her have her wedding and dealt with the fallout later. But they're missing the point. This wasn't just about the wedding. This was about respect. I was her father, and she acted like I was irrelevant. Like I was just a credit card with a pulse. I wasn't about to keep letting her walk all over me. After that call, Marissa and I sat down again. I told her what I'd done. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "If she doesn't respect you enough to invite you, she doesn't deserve your support." And that right there, that hit home. For years I'd bent over backwards for Tessa, always trying to be the bigger person, always giving in. But I'd had enough. The next day, that's when the whole thing started to unravel. The wedding planner called, panicked, saying their crew couldn't get into the venue to start setting up. Apparently, the venue staff had already begun clearing everything out. I wasn't there to see Tessa's reaction, but I heard through a friend that it was pure chaos. Vendors were showing up with no idea what was happening. Guests were arriving to confusion. Nobody had a clue what to do. Tessa tried calling me, several times in fact, but I didn't pick up. I wasn't in the mood to get screamed at again. I didn't owe her an explanation. She made her choices, now she had to live with them. Sure, I knew she'd be livid. But after everything she'd put me through, I honestly didn't care. Let her figure it out. That evening, she came to my house. I wasn't surprised. Tessa doesn't let things go easily. But I wasn't going to deal with her face to face. Not again. I needed breathing room, so I changed the gate code beforehand. She couldn't just walk in like she used to. I wasn't hiding from her. I just wasn't going to let her barge in and unload another storm of anger. I'd had my fill. She stood outside, pounding on the gate, shouting for me to come out. I stayed put. I listened, but I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She'd made it clear how she felt about me. This was me finally standing up and making it clear how I felt in return. Eventually, she gave up and left. I knew that wouldn't be the end of it. Later that week, I spoke with my parents. They weren't thrilled with how I'd handled everything. I kept hearing the same thing. "You can't be so harsh with your daughter. A parent should never give up on their child." And I get it, I really do. But they didn't see the years of disrespect. They didn't hear the tone she used, or the way she treated me and Marissa like we were disposable. They only saw the end result, not the road that led us there. They thought I was being cruel, but I wasn't going to apologize for protecting my own dignity. The whole ordeal left me torn in half. Part of me felt like I finally stood up for myself. For once, I didn't fold. But another part, that part was still hurting. She's still my daughter, and no matter how badly she treated me, some part of me will always care. I kept questioning whether I had gone too far. Should I have just let the wedding happen and dealt with it afterward? But then I remembered how she'd looked me dead in the eyes and said she didn't want me there. And that's when it hit me. How much more was I supposed to take? So that's how it all ended. Her dream wedding collapsed, and I don't know if there's a future for us anymore. I honestly don't. But I had to protect my sanity. I had to draw the line somewhere, even if it meant losing my daughter in the process. And truthfully, I don't regret it. I knew there'd be backlash after I pulled the plug, but I never expected it to fall apart so fast. The day after I canceled the venue, the planner called in a full-blown panic. He started off calm, trying to explain the situation, but I could hear it in his voice. Things were spiraling. The venue had already locked the doors. Security was showing vendors the cancellation email I'd sent. And just like that, everything went to pieces. He was begging me to reconsider, asking if there was any way to salvage it. But I wasn't budging. I told him flat out, I'm not paying for anything. As far as I'm concerned, there's no wedding. Not anymore. He tried to reason with me, stammering about unpaid vendors and last-minute fixes. But I was done being reasonable. I'd made my choice, and for once, I wasn't going to let anyone guilt me out of it. I cut him off and said, that's not my concern anymore. You'll have to take it up with Tessa. Then I ended the call. Part of me did feel bad for the guy. He was just doing his job, trying to manage the chaos. But this whole mess? It wasn't mine to clean up anymore. Tessa had made it painfully clear she didn't want me involved, so I was finally giving her exactly what she asked for. I wasn't going to be the one to fix things anymore. What happened next, I didn't hear about until later. Apparently, when Tessa showed up at the venue and realized the entire thing had been canceled, she absolutely lost it. I mean, full-on breakdown. From what I was told, she arrived expecting everything to be perfectly arranged, tables set, decorations in place, caterers bustling around. Instead, she found an empty venue, nothing but a locked gate and a confused security guard telling her she wasn't allowed in. She tried calling me again, but by then I'd already blocked her number. I couldn't deal with another screaming match. I think she thought I was bluffing, that I'd fold at the last minute like I always used to. But when she realized I was serious, everything unraveled fast. The guards told her she couldn't come in, and that's when she snapped. I heard she started screaming at them, demanding to be let inside, threatening legal action like that was going to magically reverse everything. She even tried to force her way in, which led the guards to call the police. If Damon hadn't shown up right then, I genuinely think Tessa would have been hauled away in handcuffs for trespassing. He managed to calm her down barely before things got completely out of control. But the damage? That was already done. Her perfect day was officially a disaster. While all hell was breaking loose at the venue, I was at home, sitting in the quiet, waiting for the inevitable fallout. I knew Tessa wouldn't just let this go. And sure enough, that evening she showed up at my house. She started pounding on the fence, yelling for me to come out and face her. But I stayed inside. I already knew there was nothing left to say. We'd said it all, and none of it had changed a thing. I could hear her shouting, accusing me of ruining everything, calling me selfish. A part of me wanted to walk out and tell her the truth. To explain that I did what I did because I had no other choice. But another part of me knew it wouldn't make a difference. She'd already decided who I was in her head, and nothing I said was going to change that story. So I let her scream. Let her get it all out. Eventually, she gave up and left. After she stormed off, I sat down with Marissa. We talked through the entire thing. She was, as always, right there beside me, reminding me that I had finally stood up for myself. But no matter how much support she gave me, I still felt torn inside. On one hand, I knew I had done the right thing. Tessa's behavior had been spiraling for years. This wasn't a sudden blow-up, it was the result of years of tension and disrespect. But even so, the guilt crept in. The guilt of being the reason my daughter's wedding never happened. And of course, word spread fast. I hadn't told anyone what happened, but Tessa clearly wasted no time sharing her version with the rest of the family. Soon I started getting calls. People asking me why I'd ruined everything. Why I couldn't just let her have her day. Even my parents were disappointed. They didn't agree with the way Tessa had treated me, but they still felt I should have let the wedding go forward and dealt with the emotional wreckage afterward. I tried to explain it wasn't about that one day. It was the boiling point after years of being disrespected and pushed aside. But they didn't get it. To them, it was just another father-daughter fight that time would eventually mend. But to me, it felt like the breaking point. The next few days were quiet. Tessa didn't call, and neither did I. I tried to give myself time to process everything, but the guilt kept bubbling up. I kept replaying it in my head, wondering if I'd gone too far. Wondering if I should have just swallowed my pride one more time. I brought it up with Marissa again. She didn't hesitate. She reminded me of all the times Tessa had steamrolled me, all the times I bent over backwards to avoid conflict. And she was right. I'd spent years sacrificing my own peace just to keep Tessa from exploding. And where had it gotten me? Shut out of my own daughter's wedding. Ignored. Blamed. Discarded. There comes a moment when you just have nothing left to give. And for me, that moment came when she looked me in the eye and said she didn't want me there. That was it. The final blow. This wasn't some little argument. This was years of resentment exploding all at once. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't keep fighting a war I wasn't allowed to win. So yeah, that's how it went down. Not glamorous. Not easy. But it was the truth. It was ugly and it hurt like hell. But in the end, I stood my ground. Even if it meant things got messy. Even if it meant I lost her. A couple of months passed. Things settled. No more calls. No more yelling. Then one afternoon I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Damon. My stomach dropped. For a second I thought something terrible had happened to Tessa. But Damon quickly assured me she was okay. He said she wasn't in danger, but that she wanted to see me. Or at least, that's what he claimed. I was caught off guard. I asked him why, and he told me it'd be easier to explain in person. He said he was back in town and asked if I'd be willing to grab dinner. I agreed. A part of me hoped this was the beginning of a reconciliation. Maybe Tessa had cooled off. Maybe she was too embarrassed to face me directly, so she was sending Damon to break the ice. I showed up to dinner cautiously hopeful. But when I arrived, Damon was sitting alone. No Tessa. I asked where she was, and he just shook his head. That's when he told me they were no longer together. They'd separated. He looked tired, worn down, like someone who had been through the ringer. Then he told me something that hit me like a ton of bricks. He said Tessa had been abusive during the marriage. That she struggled with serious anger issues. That she'd scream, throw things, break stuff during even the smallest disagreements. He said he'd stuck it out as long as he could. Tried to be patient. Tried to make it work. But in the end, it just got to be too much. Damon said she had deep psychological issues, that she was constantly blaming everyone else for her problems, that she never took responsibility for anything. And it wasn't just with him, it was a pattern. Apparently, one of the biggest fights was over their move. Damon had landed a great job in another city and they had to relocate. It wasn't a bad move for Tessa, she even found a similar job with good pay. But that didn't matter. She resented leaving her hometown. She made the move miserable for both of them. And that was just one of many battles. Damon said there was another reason he wanted to meet me in person. Damon looked me in the eye and said something I didn't expect. He wanted to apologize. He told me he had seen the way Tessa treated me, Marissa, even my parents. He'd witnessed her anger, the violence, the emotional manipulation, and he stayed silent. Not because he didn't care, but because, for a while, Tessa had managed to turn him against us too. He admitted he ignored all the red flags, that he brought a lot of misery onto himself by not listening to the warnings. I told him it wasn't his fault, that the blame fell squarely on Tessa and maybe a little on me too for not knowing how to raise her better. I also told him I was sorry. Sorry he had to endure what he did while married to her. Then he asked me for one last favor. He said Tessa was devastated after the separation, that she'd begged him to come back. But the damage was already done. He said the love was gone. He couldn't go back to the person who'd hurt him so deeply. Still, he wished her well. He asked me gently if I could try reaching out to her. Said she had no one else, her temper had burned every bridge she ever had. No real friends left. No one stable in her life. He asked if I could talk her into therapy or help her get some kind of professional support. I told him I wanted to, but that she wouldn't even let me near her. He nodded, understanding. And I understood where he was coming from too. We both cared about Tessa even after everything. And so, after that conversation, I decided to give it one last try. I went to see Tessa. I didn't bring Marissa. I knew what would happen, and I didn't want her witnessing the ugliness. And I was right, Tessa lashed out the moment she saw me. She tore into me, screaming about everything, me, Marissa, our marriage. Even though I was standing there alone, she attacked Marissa by name, raging at the mere thought of her. I told her I was sorry. Not because I thought I was wrong, but because I wanted to reach her somehow. She was clearly in pain, and I wanted to help. I told her she could curse me, hate me, yell all she wanted, but she needed to talk to someone. A therapist. A counselor. Anyone. But she wouldn't hear it. She started dredging up old memories, past slights, ancient wounds. She shouted that she hated Marissa so much she wanted her dead. She said she didn't want us at the wedding because she was ashamed to introduce Marissa as her stepmother, ashamed of my marriage, ashamed of everything we represented. She wouldn't listen to a word I said. And then she threw me out. She stood there, blaming me for every single failure in her life, like I was the source of it all. I looked at her one last time and said quietly, I tried. But I won't try again. There's only so much patience a person can give. And I had just crossed that line. Take care of yourself, Tessa, I said. Then I turned and walked out. No slamming the door. No yelling. Just a quiet, steady walk away. Because there was nothing left to say. She had made her feelings known, and now so had I. It's been 2 years since that day. In that time, I focused on healing. On fixing parts of myself I hadn't even realized were broken. I stopped explaining myself. Stopped defending my choices. Most of all, I stopped hoping. These days, when someone brings her up a question, a rumor, a passing comment, I just shake my head and say, I'd rather not talk about that. And that's all they get. I no longer owe anyone a story. I'm finally at peace with my decision. I sleep easier now. I breathe deeper. Marissa and I are still together. Stronger than ever. Just a few days ago, my mother called. Her voice was quiet, cautious, like she didn't know how to begin. Elliot, she said, I thought you should know. Tessa's in a mental health facility. I didn't say anything. I just listened. She's not doing well, my mother continued. They say she's struggling emotionally, mentally, it's serious. Still, I said nothing. Then she asked, do you think you'll go see her? I paused. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wanted to make sure she really heard it. No, I said. Not anymore. There was silence on the line. But I didn't try to fill it. I've spent too much of my life patching cracks I didn't create. This isn't bitterness talking. This is peace. This is clarity. I tried. Again and again, I tried. But what started as trying turned into surviving, and surviving eventually turned into surrender. There comes a time when enough is enough. And for me, that time came long ago.